What happens when the kindest person you know stops being kind? What happens when the empath who absorbs everyone as pain finally reaches the point where something inside them snaps? This was not a hypothetical question for Carl Jung. It was a reality he encountered repeatedly in his clinical work, a psychological pattern so unsettling that he privately described it as one of the most terrifying transformations he had ever witnessed in human nature. Jung noticed that certain individuals, often deeply empathetic, emotionally sensitive, and outwardly gentle, would arrive in his clinic appearing fragile, apologetic, and broken. But beneath that surface, something else was forming, something dormant, something dangerous only to those who had mistaken kindness for weakness. Jung observed that these individuals were not merely sensitive, they were profoundly perceptive. They had spent their lives absorbing emotional pain that was never meant to be theirs. Alcoholic parents' rage, partners' infidelity, family members' dysfunction, social systems that quietly fed on their empathy while offering nothing in return. They became what Jung understood as emotional shock absorbers. People unconsciously assigned the role of carrying collective psychological pain so others didn't have to. What disturbed Jung was not the abuse itself, it was what these empaths did with it. Again and again, Jung noticed the same pattern. These patients did not describe their suffering chaotically, as one might expect from someone emotionally overwhelmed. Instead, they spoke with eerie clarity. They remembered everything: exact phrases, precise moments, emotional shifts, behavioral inconsistencies. They knew who hurt them, how they did it, and why. Jung realized these individuals hadn't been passively enduring pain. They had been studying it. This discovery unsettled him deeply. The empath's mind, Jung concluded, does not function like a victim's diary. It functions like a strategist's war room. Every emotional injury is catalogued. Every manipulation pattern is mapped. Every inconsistency is noted, not consciously, not deliberately, but inevitably. Their nervous systems were wired for pattern recognition in human behavior at a level most people never develop. And yet, these empaths almost never used this information. Why? Because society had taught them that seeing too much was dangerous, that naming truth was cruel, that asserting boundaries was selfish. So they learned to doubt their own perceptions. They apologized for noticing lies. They explained away abuse. They minimized their intuition. They told themselves they were imagining things. But Jung understood something most people never grasp. Truth does not disappear when ignored. It accumulates. And when it accumulates long enough, it transforms. Jung began testing these individuals without fully telling them what he was doing. He introduced colleagues into sessions people the empaths had never met. Within minutes, these patients could identify childhood wounds, attachment styles, emotional defenses, and core insecurities with astonishing accuracy. Jung documented accuracy rates that exceeded 95%. These individuals were not psychic, they were observant to an almost inhuman degree. Jung's hands reportedly shook as he wrote his notes. Because he realized he was not treating broken people, he was sitting across from suppressed psychological power. Society had misnamed their gift. What was called oversensitivity was actually advanced emotional intelligence. What was labeled weakness was untrained strength. What appeared as fragility was restraint. Jung came to a chilling realization. Empaths do not break because they feel too much. They break because they are told their feelings are wrong. But the breaking point, Jung discovered, was not collapse. It was ignition. Across case after case, Jung documented a moment he later understood as a clarity event. The trigger was always betrayal, specifically. Betrayal by someone the empath had fully trusted and protected. A partner's infidelity. A family member's financial manipulation. A revelation that confirmed what the empath had sensed all along but refused to believe. The devastating part was not the betrayal itself. It was the realization that they had known. At first, the empath responded as they always had. Silence, self-blame, overfunctioning, trying harder, being kinder. But eventually, something irreversible occurred. Their pattern recognition overwhelmed their need to preserve the illusion. And when that happened, Jung observed something that terrified everyone involved. The empath did not explode. They went quiet, not numb, not dissociated, calm, unnaturally calm. Jung described this as the moment when emotional intelligence fused with analytical clarity. The empath stopped absorbing, stopped explaining, stopped justifying, and began seeing. When they finally spoke, they did not attack, they revealed every inconsistency, every lie, every manipulation. Not emotionally but surgically, like a surgeon calmly identifying diseased tissue before removal. This was not revenge. Jung was clear about that. This was shadow integration. The empath's shadow, Jung realized, was not cruelty. It was suppressed intelligence, suppressed strength, suppressed discernment. When these elements were finally integrated, the empath became psychologically complete. And once complete, they could no longer be manipulated. What frightened Jung most was not the intensity of this transformation but its permanence. These individuals did not revert. They did not apologize for their boundaries. They did not return to people-pleasing. They became selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but fiercely protective of where their care flowed. This was only the beginning. After the transformation, Jung noticed something even more unsettling. The empath's external world reorganized itself rapidly, almost violently. Relationships collapsed not because the empath destroyed them, but because the empath stopped enabling dysfunction. Abusive partners were exited with precision. Toxic family systems destabilized overnight. Manipulative individuals withdrew without confrontation, sensing instinctively that their tactics no longer worked. Jung referred to this phenomenon as predator recognition. Those who rely on manipulation can sense when someone is no longer exploitable. They feel it before a word is spoken. Integrated empaths did not need to announce their power. Others could feel it. Jung observed that people who once dismissed these empaths now felt nervous around them. Not because the empath was aggressive, but because they were no longer accessible, no longer predictable, no longer hungry for approval. The empath had become psychologically sovereign. What disturbed Jung most was how successful these individuals became. Their intuition, once suppressed, now guided every decision. Their businesses thrived because they read unspoken needs instantly. Their relationships stabilized because they identified emotional predators within minutes. Their judgment became nearly flawless not because they stopped caring, but because they trusted their perceptions completely. And then Jung realized something that made him deeply uneasy. These empaths could manipulate others just as easily as they had once been manipulated. They understood human psychology with terrifying precision. They could predict reactions, influence outcomes, control emotional dynamics. Their power in social systems was immense. Yet across every case Jung followed, the same choice emerged. They didn't use it. Instead, they disengaged. They removed themselves from toxic environments. They invested only in reciprocal relationships. They used their abilities to protect, not dominate. Jung called this the integrated empath, someone capable of extraordinary sensitivity and extraordinary restraint. But Jung also recognized the danger. An empath who integrates their shadow without ethical grounding could become devastating. That knowledge haunted him. He scattered his findings across private journals, never publishing them fully. He feared what would happen if these insights were weaponized. Over time, Jung identified consistent stages in empath transformation. First came recognition the moment empaths stopped pathologizing their perceptions. Second came integration, the merging of compassion and strength. Third came application, the strategic use of emotional intelligence. These individuals became what Jung quietly referred to as psychologically resilient architects, people capable of navigating human systems with unmatched clarity. The final stage surprised him most. Return to service. Integrated empaths did not become cold. They became discerning. They helped selectively. They supported others who were ready to awaken. They formed invisible networks of psychologically resilient individuals. Jung realized he was witnessing not isolated cases, but an evolutionary pattern. Empathy, he concluded, was not a disorder. It was an advanced psychological capability operating in systems designed to exploit it. Jung's final notes on these cases were both beautiful and unsettling. He wrote that these individuals proved the empath's journey is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. They did not feel less, they chose better. His last warning to future psychologists was simple and chilling. Never underestimate someone who has learned to trust their own perceptions completely. Because the awakened empath is not fragile. They are untouchable. And Jung believed they represented the next evolution of human consciousness, people who could feel everything without being destroyed by it, see everything without becoming cynical, and love deeply without losing themselves. The empath will snap. That much is inevitable. The only question is whether that transformation will be conscious or forced. And according to Jung, those who awaken consciously become something the world desperately needs and quietly fears. Someone who sees everything, needs nothing, and can no longer be controlled.